background. Thank you, Councillor Nancy. Appreciate that. That's good crowd control. Good start. Okay, councillors, we're right to go, Kirsten? Sorry, you give me the nod, hey? That's all right. Don't know where anyone is. The boycott. We're just getting some technical things sorted out here, councillors. Morning, General Manager. Thank you. Welcome. Well, good morning, councillors. Welcome to the February round of our statutory meetings. Morning, Councillor Carroll. Can I acknowledge you, CEO Brian, General Manager Nicola, others in the room. We do have the Planning and Development Committee first up. However, before doing that, there's just a few things I'd like to mention as Acting Mayor, first of which is that the Mayor is still in transit due to Cyclone Gabrielle in New Zealand on the way through. That's delayed things slightly, but he's expected to return back to the region this afternoon. Councillors, I begin with acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land in which we meet, pay respects to elders past, present and emerging. And there's three items I would like to raise to councillors' attention, and more importantly, I guess, or just as importantly, to the community. The first of which, of course, is the great sadness that we learnt of the passing of Robert William Brown. Mr. Brown passed away as a result of injuries he suffered in an attack outside a shopping centre recently, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family and friends at this time. Unfortunately, this isn't the only act of violence we've seen in our community recently, and I'm pleased to see a Toowoomba Community Forum, Safety Forum, will be held in Toowoomba tomorrow night to talk to residents in our community about concerns they have. This is being conducted through the state government and being arranged by Queensland Police Service locally. Queensland Police Minister Mark Ryan, Youth Justice Minister Leanne Linnard and Police Commissioner Katarina Carroll, along with other officials, will be in attendance. As I say, this is being organised by the Darling Downs District Office of the Queensland Police Service, and the forum will be held at the Empire Theatre in the Armitage Centre from 7 p.m. tomorrow evening. Tickets for the event are free. However, residents will need to register to attend, and you can do this online through Eventbrite. And I'm sure that there is plenty of media in regard to that, and undoubtedly it's being, in fact, almost oversubscribed at the moment. So obviously people are being able to access the tickets through Eventbrite. But as I said from the outset, it's the passing of Mr. Robert William Brown that we have the greatest level of sadness for today. The second element this morning is the earthquake vigil that will take place this Thursday evening in the Civic Square, and we pay our respects to those lost, injured and displaced by the recent earthquake along the Turkish and Syrian border. This disaster is obviously on a massive scale and has become the world's deadliest seismic event in more than a decade. In 2013, councillors will remember that Toowoomba was officially declared a refugee welcome zone and has helped to resettle many families of Kurdish, Turkish and Syrian background. Many of those families will have loved ones back home impacted, and we want to show that Toowoomba in our region is thinking of them and has support services in place at this awful time. So on Thursday this week at 6 p.m, Toowoomba Regional Council will be hosting a vigil at the Civic Square for those lost in the earthquake. Key landmarks, including the City Hall, the Annex and Victoria Street Bridge, will light up in special colours at the time of the vigil to further show Toowoomba's support. So obviously our thoughts and prayers are with those who are local here, who have family and friends and relatives who are yet unaccounted for in this terrible tragedy. The final piece of information, and it's the most happiest piece of information today, I'm very pleased to say, and that's for one of our colleagues. You will know, councillors, that each of the annual conferences of the Local Government Association, years of service are recognised for councillors. And in 2022, there were a number of councillors here recognised, and one of which who couldn't be present for that evening but was present at the conference was Councillor Bill Carl. And today, Councillor Carl, it is my great pleasure on behalf of Mark Jemison, the President of LGAQ, to present you with your 18 years of service to local government. That was last year, so you're already up to 19 now. But just a couple of little things about Councillor Carl. Councillor Carl began his career in local government with the Crows Nest Shire Council, representing Highfields for 4 years before becoming a councillor at the amalgamated Toowoomba Regional Council in 2008. He's held a range of important portfolios during those various terms and is currently the portfolio lead for planning and development during an extremely important time for council as we develop a new planning scheme. By the community, supporting the community. 18 years, of course, by the community, supporting the community. 18 years, of course, is an incredible achievement in any job, in any occupation, but to represent the community and dedicate one's life to do the best for their community is something that should be recognised, and we'll certainly do that today. But Councillor Carl, in doing so, I would like to also pay tribute to Kim, because it's not just the individual that sits around this table, but it's the family, it's the loved one, it's the close ones near to you, and it's the friends that actually that feel quite the burden sometimes of being an elected representative. So, colleagues, if you'll join me through acclamation as Councillor Clough, if you'd like to come forward, and we present 18 years of service.
Can I just say very briefly, thank you. Thanks, Tony and colleagues. On a personal note, this is very much probably the best term over the career in local government that I've experienced today. There were some really happy memories and that around Crow's Nest, but from amalgamation time, I've really appreciated each and every one of you around the table this term. And I say again, it's probably been my best term, and I've enjoyed it. Some weathered bliss at times, but that's what the job's about. Thank you very much. Good on you.
So, councillors, thank you for your attention this morning. Thank you again for the gallery and those watching online. I'd now like to hand over to Councillor Megan O'Hara-Sullivan to conduct the Committee for Planning and Development.
Very good. Okay, so welcome to the Planning and Development Committee meeting for February 2023. The meeting is open to the public and also will be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you in the room today with us and acknowledge everyone watching via Council social media channels. I acknowledge the Acting Mayor, Councillor McDonald, Portfolio Leader, Councillor Carl, Councillors, CEO, General Manager of Planning and Development. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabul and Jarowair peoples, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. I too would like to congratulate my councillor colleague, Councillor Carl, on his 18 years of service. It's a long time. You would have seen a lot of scraps and scrapes and a lot of highlights too. So it's really lovely, along with, say, Councillor Taylor, who has that experience and longevity to bring your wisdom to the table. So thank you very much. I'll start with wishing you all a happy Valentine's Day too, because I love your work. Love your work. All right, attendance and apologies, leave of absence, declarations of conflict of interest. We have an apology from the Mayor, Councillor Antonio, and also from Councillor Bonhoff. There are no declarations, and we'll go to item number 3.
Madam Chair, we may need a
Oh,
motion,
motion
for both.
beg your pardon, can I have someone move that we have an apology from the Mayor? Councillor Shine, and seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. All those in favour? Do we need, we don't know. Councillor Bonhoff's got a leave of absence, yeah. So item number 3 is the Development Statistics Report for December 2022, and the General Manager, Nicola, is going to take us through that. Thanks, Nicola.
Good morning, and thank you very much, Chair, and happy Valentine's Day to you all as well. I hope you get chocolates or flowers, or to go to bed early so you can have a bit of a sleep and catch up. It's probably what everybody's wishing for. So I've got the pleasure in introducing our statistics report, which you all will have read. So this month, in December, we had detached dwelling approvals and unit approvals decreased in December of 2022 compared to the previous month. We had 80 lots that were sealed and released into the market, and during the same period, 39 new houses were approved. The total number of development applications received during the month of December was 161 compared to 245 for November. Of these applications, 70 were planning related applications and 91 were building, siting, discretion and plumbing related applications. The total number of development applications during the month of December was 145 compared with 211 in November. There was one refusal. Of the 145 approvals, 56 were planning related approvals and 89 were building, siting, discretion and plumbing related. For the last 12 months, the monthly average number of development applications received is 261, and the monthly average number of development applications approved is 243. In December of 2022, these figures were below average, so there is an incorrect statement there where it says above average. So the figures were below average. So the December figures were 161 and 145 respectively. At the end of December 2022, there were 350 planning related applications and 142 building and plumbing related applications that were not yet decided and were at various stages of the assessment processes. So during December 22, 217 new lots were approved and 80 sealed, compared with 45 new lots and 105 sealed during November. And in the same period, we had 39 new dwellings and 2 new units were approved, which increased our housing stock by 41, and that compared to 56 new dwellings and 4 new units in November. Building approval numbers have been fluctuating, as we've been saying, for the last 12 months. For December 2022, approval numbers and value functions decreased compared to November 2022. That's not uncommon. Obviously, we go through a period of closures, particularly in January. The area goes quite quiet in terms of building. And there is a declining trend line for approval numbers and a rising trend line for value functions for the last 24 months. The total number of building applications approved for dwellings, extensions, units and Class 2 to 9 applications during the month of December 2022 was 164 for our region, compared with 235 for November. The combined value of approved building applications for December was just in excess of $33 million, and this compared to $52 million in November, which was a slight increase if you remember those November figures. In terms of our decision making periods for the month of December show that of decisions made, 88% were decided within the relevant decision timeframes, and we've made reference to the appropriate acts there. And the average decision making period for survey plan sealing was 2.8 days, so that is often commonly around 8 days. So during the 22 period, 2022 calendar year overall, there were 3,048 building applications that were approved, and that was a total value of just in excess of $598 million. During the same period, 3,129 development applications were received and 2,915 approvals were issued. I might take the time to provide you with some statistics about the policy that Council introduced which was a temporary economic development incentive for medium density residential development. Now, as you know, Council approved that quite recently. It has a cap on the policy of $3.5 million. At the moment, possible discounts are sitting at around just over $580,000. And of those applications received, there has been a total of 20 applications, and the breakdown is as follows. So we've had 65 two-bedroom unit applications, 35 three-bedroom unit applications, and 4 dual occupancy unit applications. So that's some very good, quite short-term improvements there, and we're really pleased to see that that policy has been put into effect by a number of developers and applicants. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions for the General Manager. Thank you very much, Nicola, for that, because that was a question I was going to ask you, because I noticed that there's, I could be wrong, but more, obviously, of those applications for the medium density incentives. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that to us. Any questions for the General Manager? Councillor Melissa Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thanks, Nicola, for the report. Just a question, general, and you know, this is probably just more of a general question over planning as a whole. But do you believe that the rate increases that are occurring are affecting the numbers for our region at all, or what is there an impact at all? Do you believe? Sorry, the mortgage rate increase, interest rate. Sorry, I knew what I was talking about.
Thank you for the question. I think it may be too early to see that. And if we were looking at just one tool as a measurement, for example, the medium density policy, because it was only introduced recently, we can't actually see if we would have had more applications if it had been brought in, say, a year ago. So for a lot of our things, we're not actually seeing the effect of mortgage rate rises. I think what we might see towards the end of this calendar year, is when those blocks are being brought on to sell, whether there is a delay in actually selling off some of that land that's available for building. But we're not really in a position to sort of say anything conclusively. I think we will see the effects of the interest rate rises and the cost of living pressures start to hit a home over this next 18 months. But we're likely to start seeing a trend from probably June or July onwards. So we'll be looking at how long it takes to sell blocks and those types of things.
Thank you. Any further, Councillor Shine?
Thanks, Chair. Just on that point, I noticed on the graph on page 21 that the lower activity in that November-December area was the same as was at the end of 22 and at the end of 21. So it must be, you know, one would assume it's more of a seasonal thing than anything else. That decrease, that last decrease sort of started before the interest rates really started to rise. My question, though, relates to page 18, the new temporary incentive policy applications. I noticed, I think you might have just touched on that before, but I noticed that the date of lodgement were in at least for two, if not, yeah, at least for two of the four, were in January 2020. Just wondering, it seems to be some time ago, whether what is the reason for that length of time for these applications to be approved or dealt with? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shine. And it's actually an error within the graph. If you have a look, the at that, for example, the first one, it has the date lodged at 0901. It says 20, but the 23 is carried down further into the next line. So what we're going to do is just make that a little wider. So I'm sorry, that's an error in the way that we've
Sorry, I should have
formatted that.
Should have worked that out myself. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
No further questions for the General Manager? Can I have someone move that the report of the General Manager, that the report of the General Manager Planning and Development Group on the regional development statistics for December 22 be noted by Council? Councillor Carl, seconded by Councillor Melissa Taylor. All those in favour? It's carried. Can someone move that the meeting is adjourned? Councillor McMahon and Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you.
I have a bit more information as well, but we've only managed to put it together last night and this morning.
Okay.
So what we'll end up looking at is whether we should, if we haven't reached that cap, whether we extend the
Okay.
policy.
Yeah. All right.
Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here chairing the Water and Waste Committee. It's been a while since I've had this opportunity. Always a pleasure. So welcome. This meeting is open to the public and it is being live streamed. So hello to everybody on there watching. I hope there's a lot of you. It's very important to keep an eye on council and how things are progressing. I'd also like to take the opportunity to ponder on the words of Councillor Jeff, the acting mayor, earlier on. I think we're living in very troubled times, both here locally, in the city and the region, but also internationally, and we should always ponder and appreciate the lifestyle that we have, and be thankful, I guess, that we are where we are. I'd also like to note an apology from Mayor Paul Antonio, who's on leave at the moment. I don't believe a motion is required, is it? No, thank you. There's also a leave of absence for Councillor Rebecca Von Hoff, which is to be noted. We have no agenda items on the Water and Waste Committee, so on that note, I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you. Very short, brief.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Committee meeting for February. Can you believe it's February? I'd like to recognise our portfolio leader, Councillor Melissa Taylor. I'd like to recognise the Acting Mayor, Councillor Jeff McDonald, my colleagues, and congratulations, Councillor Bill, on your 18 years of service. It's something that probably when we ponder on that, it's probably not going to be too many people that get to that in the future, I guess, because it's become obvious, except out in the rural areas, that there's quite a large turnover of not always at the public's behest, but because it's a difficult job to do to keep everyone happy, I guess, and we're working with lots of requests and expectations and less money as we go forward. So it is a big achievement, and I know that everyone in this room is here for the right reason, and I think most people in local government are too, so congratulations to you. Welcome to everybody in the room. Our General Manager, I've got Councillor Nick, we've got General Manager Nicola, and I'd like to recognise the CEO and our General Manager, Mike Brady. I think we've got Rodney. Is Rodney coming? No, so it's just Mike that's with us today. And Kirsten, of course. Thank you, Kirsten, for keeping us right. We do need I'd like to recognise the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today, the Western Waka Waka, the Guyabal, the Jadawa and the Biggamal people who hold land rights to our west of our shire. And I'd like to recognise them who also have been awarded the Tabia Reserve just recently. So I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and the bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. Can I have a motion for the apology for our Mayor, Councillor Paul Antonio? Moved Councillor McDonald, seconded Councillor Shine. Those in favour? It's carried, thank you. As we've heard, it's going to be the longest trip home for him, I think, so I think he'll be very pleased to get here. We have one item on our agenda today, which is the right turn filter function at council's controlled signalised intersections. And I'll hand over to Mike Brady to introduce that item to you. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. It's good to be here. Councillors, this report came at the request of council from the October ordinary meeting, and so the report's been done and tabled for council today. It's to do with why we have putting filter right turn control function in on council controlled signalised intersections, and it's for council to consider that. But this is in many ways an operational matter of safety, road safety improvements that we've been implementing across the region for many years. The filter right turning action is where a motorist is waiting for a gap in traffic to make a right turn, and as traffic lights have evolved over the years, initially that in many cases was allowed just to happen on green, but as the years have gone by, what has become apparent is the number of accidents and that have happened at uncontrolled right turns. And the latest one that happened in Toowoomba, where a person got killed very unfortunately, was at the top of James and Humes Team R intersection just at the early December. So there's real reasoning why these right turn signals have gone in, controls have gone in over the years. And it's being implemented not just here in Toowoomba, but not just across Queensland, but across the whole of Australia. I think the table in the exec summary actually points very clearly as into the key benefit from persons that we're helping in regards to protecting from a road safety perspective, and that what a filter control actually does. And the accidents noted there over the last 5 years, and the split across those that have no control or those that have full control is quite obvious. That said, councillors, we've taken the report through not only bringing to your attention where the Australian road safety strategies are, where the Queensland road safety strategies is, and for that matter where our own road safety strategy says what we'd have tried to achieve. But we have looked at options should council wish not to take on board where those directions are going and look at something somewhat different. And the 5 options reviewed was revert back to allowing filtering at all intersections at all times. A couple of options looking at the different times of day and seeing if that was appropriate, and also one looking at a case-by-case risk-assessed basis. And obviously the option of where we are today, where we're not looking at returning back to right turn filtering, and that over time we'd keep on implementing implementing filter control. With that in mind, councillors, I'm not going into too much more detail, but we are looking for council's full support that we continue in the direction that we are going with controlled right turn movements at signalised intersections. Happy to take questions.
Councillors, I'd just like to say, as the councillor that has been involved in road safety and the development of our first road safety strategy, and we've had another one, and that's looking at a refresh now. Having gone to roads and transport conferences up in Alice Springs twice, where you know, certainly not a filtered intersection, but a gentleman was up there. His daughter had broken down on the side of a road, and she and the NRMA person was killed by a car because there wasn't enough take-off room. And that's where, if you've had a look, and I'm sure, I don't know whether you have, because we have so much to read, but the National Road Safety Strategy and what is mentioned, this is a very good report because it's mentioned in here that it has you know, nobody should die because they've made a mistake, and it's got a zero tolerance of death in the national and the state, and our local one should all fit under those things as well. So I just point out to you also that in this report it says that congestion costs our nation $16.5 billion a year, but the cost of accidents is almost double that, in $30.5 billion. So it's a sobering thought. So over to you if you have any questions or comments. Thank you. Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mike, for your report. And I must say, accidents happen all the time in many places and for many reasons. Network congestion continues to grow, and council should be looking at ways to relieve it, in my view, rather than what this will do, particularly as our population grows. I liken removal of filtered turnings to putting plugs in PowerPoints so children don't stick something in them. It's educating people. You educate the child not to put something in the PowerPoint. Residents are constantly being over-regulated through creep. And I worry about the data that's being used to urge this regulatory creep, in particular shown to reduce right turn crashes by 60%, which is stated in this report. I wonder, how do we know that? How do we know that we've reduced right turn crashes by 60%? Also, the crashes at these intersections, we don't know the exact cause. It could be that somebody's turning back to look at a child that's screaming in the back seat, or something else that's distracted them. We don't know what really causes a lot of these accidents, but they're all put down to a particular statistic. So many times I have sat at an intersection with a red turn arrow and not another vehicle in sight. It's just not efficient. It causes congestion, impatience, frustration, and emits more fuel emissions, harming the environment further. This isn't just one car sitting idling at lights, but thousands across the state at any given time. I have questions in relation to the 5 options put before us today, where it talks about costs, how many lights have been converted to date, and how many are there all up that would require conversion. I felt that those 2 points should have been in the report, so if we could find that out before next Tuesday, if it's not, those details aren't on hand right now. I am really against this suggestion, because I don't think it's the right thing to do if we want to keep moving the traffic in our city.
Thank you,
Some
Mike.
responses?
Thank you.
I'll just start with the last part of the queries there, if I could, through to you, councillors. First of all, the number of intersections we're talking about are noted within the table. Council has 62 intersections that we have signals on that we control across this city. TMR have approximately the same number as well. So across the city, it's a bit over 120 sets of signals. As noted in there, of our 62, we've got 5 that are mid-block crossing. So they obviously aren't at an intersection. So that takes us back to 57. And a number of those are at what you'd find T intersections as well. So they would not be appropriate there. So that's the first part in respect to that. In regards to if you go to the end of the background section of the report, just before consultation, the paragraph before consultation, I'll just bring it up again. Page 53 of 76, councillors, at the top there. And that paragraph goes into a bit of thing of the 62 intersections, 32 currently still allow filter turns in all directions at all times of day. 9 intersections allow filter turns on one or more approaches, with a further 4 intersections only restricting the filter turn on certain approaches at certain times of day, leaving 17 intersections, as I said, 5 of mid-block, that have no filter turn movements. Attachment 3, so more detail there. Using the current methodology of removing filter turns when an intersection is upgraded and based on the current level of funding provided for by council in signal upgrades, it is anticipated that to remove filter turns from all council intersections could take a further 10 to 15 years to complete. Should additional annual funding be provided for removal of filter turns, this time could be reduced. So I think that, yeah, so that's the thing. Back to the first couple of queries around the statistics. The statistics are well-researched statistics through both federal and state government departments and through the information, and are based, the 60% reduction in accidents and that are based on national and state research. Right turn accidents, and I think attachment 2 really is a key attachment in regards to, you know, why, the fact sheet of why we have this safety standard and what we're trying to achieve. When we look at risk as an organisation, as council, if I said to you, with your water supply, we could have E. coli readings, okay? We have a zero tolerance for E. coli. We have a zero tolerance in our water supply that we provide our people on anything. And we have saved many people, not only here, but across the world when it comes to that. So across Australia each year, it is in the order of about 1,200 persons a die each year on the road network.
Point of order.
So when it comes to...
Pause for 1 minute, thanks, Mike. Your point of order, Councillor Summerfield?
Madam Chair, the General Manager should remain sticking to this report. I believe that's considered debating when you're starting to use other
Councillor Summerfield, I don't
examples.
agree with you. What he's saying is a loss of life. He's pointing out the comparison of loss of life in one area as to loss of life in another area,
I
and
believe he
I
should
believe
stick to
it's
the
okay.
report.
And I'll rule that it's fine. Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
I'll move forward. What I'm trying to point out is risk. Council has an opportunity here to manage risk, okay? And on the road network, on the part of the road network that we control, we've got that opportunity to manage that for our community, as we do with every other asset that we own. And that's what we're trying to achieve when we look at our road network. Okay, we're trying to give a safe, yes, congestion is an issue, and we try to, you know, improve that where we can over time, again, as funding and other investment avails us. But crash risk for motorists is, as indicated by the Chair earlier, a huge cost to the Australian community, and it's a huge cost to our community. And at what point, you know, it's trying to find that balance. What is that balance? What are we willing to accept? Our road safety, the national, state and our own road safety strategy that this council has endorsed fully supports a zero outcome, okay? So as a council, we've already signed off that that's what we intend to achieve or try to achieve and work towards. This initiative, as the statistics show, goes a long way and a fairly cost-effective way to actually reducing that for our community. And I think that's what the statistics talk to. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair, through you, and agree, Mike, thanks for the report, pulling all that information together. Just, I've got a couple of things. Firstly, of course, is around the liability to council in regard to this. If we've been given notification that this is a strategy from the state, and you know it's implied that we would do this, what liability is there for council from an insurance perspective if something was to happen and we didn't have this?
It's mentioned in here.
Look, the work that we're doing is a positive direction where we're going as an organisation. We're improving our risk position as we can afford to, okay? And that's what road safety risk investment's about. If you turn it the other way and start removing safety elements that we've already implemented in the network, it does and would raise a question if there was a serious incident, okay? It's not, yeah, it would put, you know, when it comes to legal issues and, you know, an accident and somebody claiming against council, etc., you know, that has to go work itself. Each case would be done on its merits, and if it's found that the removal of the right turn was a causation factor in that, you know, the level of risk, the level of liability a council would take on would be dependent on how the courts would see that.
I'd just like to mention there also that Mike has said in the report, it also says that we've received black spot funding on their criteria, and part of that criteria was to have filters taken off the turns, and it does mention in there that in some cases we may have to give some back. One of the ones that's pending at the moment that hasn't been put in is part of that, Mike. Would you like to mention that?
Yeah, look, the current projects, put them aside, we're still working through those, if I may, but in respect to what we're trying to achieve and what we've, you know, we've been very successful over the years in getting black spot funding. When it comes to black spot funding, the National Road Safety Strategy and the state's direction on road safety are all elements that are taken into account when you're looking at actually how you improve that black spot. So when you actually submit an upgrade, that's got to be in alignment with what the state and national position is. The other element to going backwards in some respects and removing filtered turns controls is and this is where we say it in the report very clearly, is that it's not we will not be taking that as an officer's decision, because from a professional perspective, we've got standards and requirements that in anything that we present, that we've got to put that forward to council as we see fit. So therefore, we'd have to come back, we'd have to do risk assessments and bring it back to council in each case for council to make that decision. So the decision of that, when you come to talking about liability, would sit squarely with council to take that role in that approach.
Councillors, if you don't realise that engineers have their own professional board and their own area, and they can, that is what Mike is saying, that the officers it will be certainly just a decision of this council. So.
I've got a couple more, if you don't mind, Madam Chair. Mike, just on that page 64 of board books, which is the fact sheet that you pointed out earlier, there's a paragraph just above safety outcomes where it talks about the 60%. It says, while the requirements to provide channeled right turn lanes only applies to major roads, filtered turns should be excluded on all approaches unless there is justification. So from a justification perspective, and noting that you've got a variety of options there for councillors to consider, what would determine a justification for that to not have to occur on that on an intersection?
That, as it indicates, you basically have to do a full risk assessment of that intersection. So if you look at your intersection, it's looking at traffic volumes, time of day, visibility. And one of the challenges that we have in Toowoomba is fog, like weather conditions. So what might be quite visible there today on many of our intersections in the middle, well, it doesn't need to be in the middle of winter, that visibility is substantially reduced. So it's looking at all the different sorts of risk factors that come into assessing that actual intersection. But once the traffic volume gets to a certain level in each direction that's coming through to the intersection, that starts, getting to a point where the gaps that are available are very limited, particularly in time available for the normal person, the average person to make a safe turn.
Thank you, Mike. And I guess the reason I raise that is because there's the intersection of Hume and Margaret Street doesn't have that. You can turn when it's what have you, which is if you look at traffic volume, that would be one you'd think would be one of the top ones to do. Yeah. And we've all travelled it. That's sometimes the only time you can actually get around, when there is that opportunity, when there are no cars coming. So I guess I come back to, and I'd like your opinion on this, General Manager, where it says reasons for the recommendation. The last paragraph talks about percentages, but then it also says 39% of fatal and serious injury crashes at signalised intersections are as a result of filter turns and controlling that movement. And I guess I touch base, or sort of reflect a little bit on Councillor Summerfield said, and back to that insurance and liability for council. At which point is it the responsibility of the driver, awareness, training and education, where responsibility is given to actually make a decision themselves rather than wait for a light?
Okay. A couple of things there. Margaret's Timar intersection, and they're in an implementation phase over a number of, probably similar to us, as funding avails to upgrade their intersections. So in time, you'll see intersections like Hume and Margaret and those sorts of ones on the Timar network with controls. What we're talking about here today is not so much going forward and what we go forward when it comes to the liability, but it's now if you start wanting to start removing them, okay? So we've taken an action as council from a liability perspective where we've, we see it as a improvement for community safety to actually improve that intersection, make it safe for the user, okay? So this isn't, so we've already implemented these ones. The council request here was to reconsider that, okay, and to potentially take those away or change them or do something else with that, okay? So that's where we've put in something to improve safety as an organisation, and now we're talking about potentially removing something that we've made safer. So that's probably the liability question mark. In regards to obviously the accident itself, that's obviously the situation that the police and the courts deal with, where that liability sits if there's an accident at the intersection. So so I think it's to be sort of somewhat some clarity today. This is not talking so much about that. It's talking about that the council request back was, in essence, to remove or to look at that. But at the same time, we've already got strategies that endorse this. Okay, our road safety strategy, which is currently under review and will be coming to council in the next, there's an information session in the next few weeks planned, within the next month anyway, because we're up to the next period for that road safety strategy.
And the first one was 2011, it was
11,
in
yeah.
that as well.
A
So.
little while. Yeah, my last one, if I could, Madam Chair, just in regard to the costs of, we're talking about between $125 or $20,000 per signal to do what we're saying, to reverse what's happening. How much is it actually to implement over those 10 to 15 years the program that we're talking about? Is it per signal about the same amount, or is it more or less?
Typically, we again, each one's on its merits. Depends the age of the asset that's there. So it's more as we go to upgrade each intersection, and that may be more to do around the amount of increases in traffic, potentially congestion issues that are happening at those intersections, and different things. So there can be this actual component of actually putting the extra control in. It's not a very big portion to that overall cost each time, but it's the rest of it is more congestion based. That said, again, in regards to intersections themselves and council's intersections across the city, there is other information sessions planned with council over the next month as well that we're bringing forward to council on potential. Council knows it's had quite a number of intersection improvement projects in the 10-year capital works program, and they'll be discussed with council in an information session in coming weeks.
Yeah,
Councillor Shine?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was pleased that Councillor McDonald raised that liability issue because obviously when people are seriously injured in a motor vehicle accident, it's important for those persons to try to recover damages for the injuries that they've sustained, and if there is a possibility of joining insured parties like the council, then that possibility would become a probability, I would have thought, if council hadn't complied, as the General Manager indicated, with the recommendations of the safety authorities to whom he referred before. I think it would be very unwise for us not to follow suit, personally. Having said that, I understand the frustrations that all of us, no doubt, feel when we are at lights and there's very little or no other traffic around. And in fact, I have a relative whose name I won't mention, but does mention the chair's name in those circumstances. I won't indicate in what way. But,
Difficult job being a councillor, isn't it?
But such as the incidents of that we as public officials have to face from time to time. However, having read the material, and especially I think it might have been the General Manager previous occasion has indicated, for the sake of a minute, which does seem like 5 minutes when you're at lights, but for the sake of a minute, all you have to dwell on is the fact that in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been several deaths in our area. One at Greenmount, I think, the weekend, wasn't it? And Oakey. They weren't at intersections, but it just happens so quickly. Nobody intends to be involved in an accident. They happen because we usually fail to pay attention. And the lights are there to help us get through intersections, not to hinder us. I think we can't, tempting though it is to pander to the impatient in our society, I think it would be wrong for us, for a number of reasons that we outlined earlier, not to accede to the recommendation of the officers.
Just mentioning about liability, the reason that they were suggesting that each intersection, if you wanted to change it, needed to have a total study into it for 20,000 for each intersection would be the only way that only perhaps insurance that council would have against liability. Thank you. Councillor Megan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, General Manager. I applaud this report, and I think I couldn't agree with the finding more, because I don't know how much of a hurry people are in. And I think the statistic there about how many requests or complaints they've had, so there's 14 out of the 11,924 requests, so that's 0.14%. Am I correct, last year was our, I don't know whether this is a state statistic or by the country, that our road toll is the worst it's ever been. Is that correct? The statistics
For
last year?
Queensland.
Yeah.
It's correct, Councillor Megan, and there's just a little anomaly that the police district is not exactly the same, doesn't align with TRC region, but it is the worst it's ever been.
Yeah, which is frightening. Can I ask, what's the maximum time that you would sit waiting? I'm not sure whether it says it in the report, waiting for any signalised turn.
It does depend on the phase that the lights are in when you come up to them, but it typically ranges, if you hit it on red, from about 20 seconds and through to probably just over a minute. So it's probably a bit more if you're unlucky to get it at a certain point in its phasing. So there's some elements within the control system that from a safety point of view, the lights have got to go through a certain set of phases to turn to where that vehicle's turned up to. Some, depending on what leg you come in, where the lights are at that point in the intersection. And it does differ between all intersections because of for instance here, I'll talk about just very briefly Herries and Victoria Street, which I know is one of those inverted commas nuisance ones. It's got to take into account there's 4 lanes of traffic on there. It's got to take into account that you've got potentially pedestrians crossing. It's all these sorts of things come into adding the seconds to those phase changes. Whereas you go to another set of lights, which is just sort of a lane in each direction and that sort of thing, it'll typically be much quicker. The positive thing is, as technology keeps evolving, that's going into, we're upgrading our signalling system all the time, and what we're trying to do is to mitigate through those technological improvements those sort of standing times and frustration times. And for instance, again, Herries and Victoria, that's actually been programmed now for 8 different phase workings through the day to take into account things like peak hour and those sorts of things, and to try to make where appropriate on the legs that have got the heavy traffic, getting that through from a traffic management congestion reduction perspective through your peak hours, but then through other periods of the day between peak hours and at night, it's on different other phasing times. So as I said, we keep seeing technology improve. You'll see the issue of that congestion and frustration at signals slowly reducing, and it is very incremental, and obviously depending on investment and time.
Can I just ask a follow-up question, Madam Chair? So sensors, are they just a myth? There's not really any sensors.
Apologies, sensors.
Yeah.
What, the in-road sensors?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you come up to that in-road sensor, okay, and that signalises that there's a vehicle there, okay, it's magnetic, it picks up the metal above, and then that's wired into the signals, and then from there that starts, the signals start reacting to that phase.
So, say, for instance, the Herries and Victoria Street one, if you're sitting there, does it make any difference? Like, or is it just on its normal phase and?
Yes, no, most definitely. So if you say you are there at midnight and you're the only car coming to that intersection, it picks you up directly. It then, through the programming, recognises that there's a vehicle there on that leg, and then it automatically then starts reconfiguring where to put the green light. So that's picking you up straight away. I've just had a note through. I do apologise, councillors. Up to 2 minutes is the absolute maximum that it can be a wait period.
Reminding councillors, TMR are going to change, they are changing all of theirs, so we'll have no control over their thing. Councillor Megan?
Yes, thank you. So
Councillor Bell?
maximum
Sorry?
2 minutes is.
Yes.
Yeah,
I would suggest that's probably at the large intersections like, James and those intersections. Councillor Bell?
Thanks, Chair. Through you to Mike. You can hardly put life at risk or injury, and I get that from a risk point of view. The thing that keeps coming back in my mind is what's possible for us, and Councillor Mel raised this some time back around ongoing prioritisation around review of the traffic light system as part of the traffic movement and transport strategy. And the reason why I raise this, and it's not off topic, because I believe we're talking about one element here, dare I say the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, rather than the guardrail around the top. And let me explain. Population, Councillor Nancy raised population increase necessitates us to continually try and direct where we can out of our budget prioritisation around this stuff. Because if we're going to talk about risk, if we're really going to be serious about risk, let's not just take the easy option driven by lag indicators, such as 39% an average across the state. That's a lag indicator. If we're going to manage risk, that's reactive. Let's look at managing risk properly around how it fits as this topic fits as part of our transport strategy management and traffic light management and movements of traffic through the traffic light network as part of that. Because I don't believe it's a solution by itself. It will never be. And all we'll get is more frustrated drivers. I agree with Councillor Jeff's comment. Some point along the line there has to be personal accountability. I think some of our judicial system in the country probably needs a review as well around the penalties in transport and traffic. But that's another topic. That's off topic. But the thing that keeps coming back to me, and I don't wish to compare it about fatalities or injuries and that's the serious end of stuff. But if we want to, and I say again, manage risk, then we have to look at this holistically. In fact, I would go as far as to say that given the criticality of this network and this critical infrastructure, it impacts economic development. And we're nothing new here. Cities go through evolution. You can go to any major city in this country, and for that matter in the world, and look at the evolution of a city and what's been the cause of a downturn in economic development. And I'll dare say that it's transport network and road movement and traffic congestion, and dare I say the word inconvenience. So if we're not looking at this and prioritising it, whilst I have trouble going against what is seen as best practice, albeit on a lag indicator, a reactive way of dealing things, we must try and prioritise. Mike, number of things there, but gee, you know, how do we, is it possible, or refresh my memory, how are we going with the constant rolling, or are we constantly reviewing, not just an upgrade of ageing infrastructure, as in the older set of traffic lights gets the next tick and flick. How do we progress this? Because this is a symptomatic problem of growth.
Councillor Cole, lights aren't considered on their own. In the road safety strategy, we consider the whole situation.
And that's
so
why, that's why I'm asking.
how it goes, and it's not a lag indicator. We had a death in our city of a 70-year-old man minding his business, doing the right thing, and a car came through a filtered intersection and killed him on a TMR.
I'm suggesting,
intersection.
I'm suggesting, as part of the broader picture, Madam Chair, that it is a lag indicator, because that's why we've got controlled right turns now. But as part of the overall network, how do we try to keep ahead of the curve and look at efficiently trying to move traffic so that driver frustration doesn't result in people running lights, whether they're controlled or not?
It's called budget reconsideration.
That's the collective impact.
Mike, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. And that's probably a matter that's sort of outside what this report's focused on today. But I understand the connection there from that, what you're saying. Council there's a number of things I've already mentioned. I've mentioned that we've got those intersection information sessions coming to Council over the next month. So there'll be opportunity to discuss some of what you're saying very much there. Proactive risk management is something that we are and very keen about, where we can try to achieve it. And I can assure you, if there's things that we work with, and even under the Black Spot program, it does talk about looking at intersections proactively. But as the Chair mentioned, it comes to affordability at the end of the day. Our ability as an organisation to afford future upgrades of our intersections is a big question mark, and something that this is part of the information sessions coming to Council. Intersections that, you know, a few years ago might have been $3, $4, $5 million are probably now $8 to $10 million to upgrade. Other intersections that are on our 10-year capital works program that were in the 10 to 15 mark are probably now in that 15 to 20 mark. And that whole affordability of those intersection upgrades, because it's not just the road, the signals, those sorts of things, it's the impact on adjoining property, utility, relocations, and all those sorts of things. But that's, I think if we could possibly leave the main element of your discussion there to then. But the other thing is that Council did ask for some stuff back some time back, and we do have one of those information sessions coming back in regards to our three different audits that Council wanted us to look at, and gave some support to the first one, which is then pending Council's thinking on this first outcome, which is really around our resourcing element. That would probably point a direction forward on those as well. So we're hoping, as I said, over coming weeks, that we've got a number of those coming through to Council on matters that are connected to this, but not directly part of this report today.
Thanks, Mike. How's it, Tim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. A lot of questions. Happy to wait my turn, but I do have a few questions, if that's all right. First one, I just wanted to pick up on TMR traffic lights are not council traffic lights. So the big ones like James, Herries, Ruthven, they're all TMR, and that's actually not what we're talking about here. We're talking about council-owned lights. So usually the TMR ones...
Councillor, Herries Street are our lights because the highway goes around. Michael, explain it to you. Herries Street are our lights.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Sorry, I'll retract that.
Herries and Hume, though, okay, is TMR. So anywhere where a state-controlled road goes through as part of an intersection, that intersection is the responsibility of the state.
Correct.
So
but
it goes
that's-
round Chalk Drive and
Yep.
comes at Harry's and comes back onto James, and that's where the highway
Yeah.
is, so.
So,
yeah.
so Chair, through you to the General Manager, when you're talking about there was a very unfortunate accident on Herries and Hume, James and Hume,
James and Hume.
and I actually drove past at that time and cars everywhere. That's not actually nothing to do with this, is it? That's not going to change if we change this because that's a TMR intersection.
The same issue, but you're correct. We have no control over what TMR then now does with that intersection. That said, they do have a safety project which has been presented previously to council in concept between Ruffin and James and Hume and James, and so that's been that concept's been presented previously to council, and obviously as the state gets funding for that concept to go to the next phases, council
Yeah.
may.
No, I suppose my point is, and I welcome that the chair may have a different point of view on this, but I would perhaps distinguish an accident on a large, busy 4-lane TMR highway, which at present has trucks all over it too, than our local traffic light system. But anyway, that's it. I'll happily take that on board. My next question is around, in the report it says we have 62 sets of council-owned traffic lights across the region at various states. Just wanted to pick up, so I'm reading page 48, estimated cost and timelines for the above 5 options range from no cost for option 5. So no cost and no time for option 5, which is not reverting back to anything. But when you look at the community consultation, 32 out of 62 still allow filtered turns in all times at all directions. So how is there a no cost to stay at number 5 when 32 of our 62 are allowing filtered turns at all times?
So, first of all, your first question, obviously in that same table, there's been 24 crashes at those 32 intersections.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying, yes, we're talking about a serious one that happened on a TMR part of the network, but we still have serious ones.
Yes.
And that,
Okay.
and that resulted, okay, in 60 casualties, all those accidents on council's network, 60 casualties. Fortunately, no deaths, no fatalities in that 5 years.
No, that's a good distinction.
Okay, but 60, and some of them very serious casualties. In respect to your other query, again, I just focus you to what the intent of this report is about. It's the reverting back, okay, not going forward, okay.
Right.
So
the
there's
decision's already been made.
if council supports this today, there's no cost to go out and change signals back to something that they were once before, okay? So basically there's no action to be done. So that's why it's a zero cost. So that's what the intent of today's report's about, and that's where the financial figures are the context of those financial figures around if we were to start looking at, going backwards in respect to what we're looking at each of the signals that have already got filter control.
Yeah, sure. No, thanks for that clarification.
Also be an anomaly in southeast Queensland.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll take that point of view. I just suppose, thanks for answering those questions. I appreciate your answers. This idea, and Councillor Jeff raised it, and it's very much along the lines of I'm thinking as well about more of an emphasis on personal responsibility rather than a nanny state at the other end. So I appreciate, Mike, you used E. coli as, in water and a zero tolerance, and you're saying it should be on roads. And maybe if we look at in my portfolio, and certainly my last job as a teacher, we had kids' playgrounds, and then we were getting kids falling off, concussion, broken arms, that kind of thing. And everyone said, let's make them more safe, let's eliminate risk, and it's only a metre less height, and all these things that, and everyone kind of got to the end of it and said, this is not the society we want to live in. And I suppose I just want to take us out of this issue and look at society as a whole, and maybe the idea that if you're sitting there and you don't feel confident going around on a filtered turn, then don't. And we need to perhaps instill that you have a responsibility, heck, you have a right to not go around the corner if you don't want to, even at a filtered turn, because you don't feel that you have the space to do it, rather than changing the law for everyone because we've had that few. So is it possible that, and I think this comes down to who's the second driver waiting. You're not allowed to beep that guy and say hurry up, because if they not feel confident, they're allowed to sit there until either an arrow comes on or they do feel confident. So I wonder about that shift in giving the responsibility and the rights to the driver looking to make the filtered turn rather than changing it for everyone. Do you have a comment on that? Is that still not a system where we can use?
There's two things there, as I said. Number one, the laws are set by the state and the federal government. Unfortunately, be it this matter or any other matter, local government doesn't get that sort of choice. So particularly when it comes to matters regarding road safety. In regards to the other matter, yes, the person sitting there does have a choice, but like we see in many, many road accidents, it's not the person that makes the choice. It's the unfortunate person that receives, that person turning right and then somebody doing perfectly the right thing on the road, getting cleaned up, and subsequently, be it a casualty or be it a fatality, that occurring, and we see that time and time again. We will make that. We make choices as a driver on the road network. Some probably a little bit more riskier than others from time to time, and that we're not only taking our own lives into our hands when we do make that choice, we're taking potentially the lives of others in our hands.
Councillor James?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mike. You probably answered a few of the questions I had earlier. So I just want to pick up probably on a point before I do agree along the lines which Councillor Carr was talking about, and I think that this isn't like in an isolated incident when it comes to road safety, but when we're sort of talking about that proactive risk management, and if we're sort of attempting or trying to be ahead of the curve, I think that's unfortunately a battle that we're probably never going to win, because you said for funding and other things like that. And the other interesting part I find out of that, and you'll probably remember it better than I, but the road safety report or something that was commissioned through the federal government that had a list of recommendations, and most of them I don't think have been, haven't been put in place. I mean, they were as high as saying there should be a minister in charge of road safety, additional funding, all those sort of things. So I guess that means that when you're talking about local government, it comes back to all of these factors we talked about around funding and a lot of the topics that have been brought up today around congestion, around traffic flow, around emissions and all of those sort of things. So risk solely, is that the best barometer, the highest priority, the only priority that we can have to place on our decisions when we make it around this? Like, say, the data like this that's produced around X amount of crashes and things like that. Like, I mean, are we in a position that that's really the only, and I'm not downplaying by any suggestion risk, because no one wants to see loss of life or anything along those lines, but is risk the whole and sole barometer that we have when we're saying, okay, it's best that we keep these in, just for instance?
I suppose, call it risk, call it good engineering practice, call it, where the world's evolved to. I think where things are going, we talk about autonomous vehicles and that coming. There's a lot of thought, in that 20 or 30 year time frame, that things like traffic signals and stuff may not necessarily be required as part of the road network, because you've got vehicles talking to vehicles and everything like this, and they automatically sort of turn and miss each other as and when they go through. Whether that is just still a little bit science fiction, or whether that'll come being in time. So I mean that there's that engineering best practice evolving all the time, be it in that case from, autonomous vehicles. There's a lot of random things that happen, obviously, on a road network that, be it in this case traffic lights, or be it, kangaroos, be it any other matter. And I think Councillor Carr was sort of pointing to, this is only just one element in the whole gambit of things. So from that point of view, I suppose where we are both, as I've said, Australia's basically taken on the international position of safe systems approach. That works its way down. There were, as you said, reports by the federal government talking about a minister or assistant minister being, and I think that was under the previous government, and putting extra billions of dollars, $3-4 billion investment into expanding on road safety elements. All those sorts of things have been discussed, as we've seen in the media, on numerous occasions, where the current federal government sits. Just last month, the state government, Minister Bailey, who's also Minister for Road Safety Queensland in his title, actually held a road safety summit in Brisbane. I haven't heard or seen the outcomes of that yet. We're waiting. We haven't seen. So there may be other elements, but obviously this is just one element of the whole road safety gambit that we try to manage on a daily basis.
Councillors, I think if there are no more questions, I'll just point out to you what's actually on page 49. Controlling the right turn movement complies with Austroads Guides Traffic Management, follows the principles of the National Road Safety Strategy 2021 to 2030, the Queensland Road Safety Strategy 22 to 2023 to 2031, the TMO Road Safety Policy 2022, and also fulfills actions 31, 35 and 36 of the TRC Road Safety Strategy 2019 to 2023. Data shows that 39% of fatal and serious injury crashes at signalised intersections are as a result of filter turns, and controlling that movement has been shown to reduce those crashes by 60%. A life lost is unacceptable. A life of one of our motorists in our community, whether they're visiting or whether they're our own, could be yours, could be mine. It's unacceptable. And anything we do to make that risk a greater risk for that motorist, anything we can do to stop that conflict, I think has to be our first consideration. But anyway, over to you, councillors.
Madam Chair, final question, if I could, from me, in any regard, through you to General Manager Mike. Mike, you mentioned 10 to 15 years to roll out this the new system, and case by case. You're talking about case by case, so you prioritise those 10 to 15 years, what you do when you do it. So would the assumption then be for our community that our sophistication with managing our traffic through the lights would also improve during that 10 to 15 years? That's what I'm hearing today, that one of the scenarios put forward was that we can go case by case, but in actual fact you're doing it case by case by implementing this, what you're talking about in any regard. So you would assess as the traffic owner, road traffic owner, controller, a risk as far as what was deemed as the most high risk and what wasn't. Is that how you would roll this out over the next 10 to 15 years?
Look, in essence, yes. Councils, we tend to, the implementation of right turn movements tend to come, as I said, as we look at each intersection from generally, there's probably two. From an upgrade perspective, so for traffic volumes and congestion matters and different things like that, and we look at the whole operation of that set of signals and that intersection. The other element is from road crash data statistics, where we then look at black spot funding and putting in for black spot dollars, which we've been quite successful as an organisation in achieving. And part of that is a requirement that if it is signals, that all standards that are current of the day are implemented, such as filtered bright turn. So that's typically why we do put in for black spots, is because there has been casualties in our case. Fortunately, maybe not fatalities, but that makes up, and that's what sits behind our black spots. And that data is state-provided data.
Thank you, and I guess just the conversation and discussion's been really fruitful in regard to painting a broader picture than just the traffic lights in this. An observation I'm sure we've all made is what happens when the lights go out and people actually drive to the traffic rules. And point of fact is Ruthven and Margaret Street, and the traffic seems to flow through there beautifully when the lights are all out. It's quite amazing. So people will turn, they'll give way, they'll do all those sorts of things. So yeah, I'm talking about ones that there aren't any enforcement agencies. So I'm sort of circling back to that commentary around, you know, driver responsibility training education, which is, as Councillor Carl says, that's the scaffolding or the fence at the top of the cliff. So I'm encouraged by the commentary that we're having some sessions in regard to the traffic light signalling. I'm encouraged that it will take 10 to 12 years or 15 years and it'll be case by case. And I'm encouraged by the fact that we are working towards a better network of traffic flow and not congestion. So that's my observations from today. Would that be fair?
Yes, very fair. And look, there's some very good examples of what you're talking about and what we're trying to implement. And the case we mentioned, lights out, it reminded me of numerous European intersections which don't have lights or anything, and they've got about 6 or 7 legs coming into the same square, and people still work their way through. But typically at very, very low speeds and that sort of thing. And it really is that behavioural thing. Councillor Carl talked about behaviours. I think a couple of other councillors talked about behaviours. But a good example of what we're doing in trying to, we don't jump to traffic lights as the ultimate. Traffic lights tend to have to be utilised on our intersections as they get busier. Normally, a lot of it comes down to land constraints. Our road reserves are quite narrow in many of our intersectional areas. We've got utilities and different things. To try to do anything else just isn't cost affordable. And so the signals, so they're a cost to themselves, are a control. But if you look at what we're trying to design for Highfields, Kraski, O'Brien intersection, that in a Highfields area, we're looking at signalisation. And looking at that was all part of that. And we would have exactly the same issues there. You'd imagine sort of Highfields at midnight, there's not that much traffic running down any of those roads. So that's where we've brought in these new generation roundabouts. So road safety, when we look at these intersections, and particularly something where we've got a bit more of a greenfield opportunity, or we've got that a width and corridor or land, we can start looking at that. And a roundabout is a roundabout will do the vast majority of even our signalised intersections, if we could ever have the land available. So to do that, and that would take our traffic volumes, and the efficiency and lack of congestion, all those sorts of things would be improved. The only, there is a quandary with roundabouts from time to time where they get unbalanced, where one leg is substantially busier, one direction is substantially busier than another. But putting that aside, the types of accidents that generally happen at roundabouts are low speed, low impact, angled crashes, and rarely do they, you might get minor casualties. But even the work that we're doing for Highfields, we're trying to bring in that balance in regards to the vulnerable user, putting in pedestrian crossings and raised wombat crossings and the like. So we're not trying to put these in unnecessarily, signals. It's sort of nearly a last resort if room and other constraints, you know, our tree-lined roads, all these sorts of things come into that equation when we're looking at them. But again, this report is not focused so much on what we're doing into the future, but if we were to revert.
And just for people who may be watching, the thing we have with Highfields, we're able to design it, whereas the others, we've got road reserves that are constrained, narrow, full of services, and also properties. So with Highfields, we're hoping that you don't often have an opportunity to design something, and you can take all those things into account, but you don't have that luxury in a city that's already functioning. Other questions? Oh, sorry, Councillor Bill, I did have you down, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Mike, pleased to hear you mention some of the other things in a suite of options available to us. Can we expect in these coming briefings, information sessions, specifically as we're talking about controlled right turn, some suggestions as to how we might rationalise right turns into the future, particularly on busy parts of the road network and around the transport strategy management concept and traffic movement, because Councillor Taylor just mentioned the restraints in brownfield are existing, and with best practice engineering standards, I'm the lay person here, that right turn options create all sorts of headaches with resumptions and the types of sweeps that you need on intersections, particularly with heavier vehicles. So I would hope that there will be some suggestion or viewing of how we rationalise and change traffic grid network and movement in the impact areas of the city and major connector roads, because you know, if we're trying to move stuff efficiently, cities that have evolved beyond us and were our size have gone down this track considerably around the direction of traffic movement in the future.
Probably a couple of points. Our teams are constantly in discussion with, particularly the traffic team, that with not only TMR but you know the other southeast councils. So we're always trying to learn from one another and try and pick up ideas and different things that initiatives that they are implementing across. You know, be it, I know we've got a good relationship with Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, Logan, and for that matter Brisbane City. So we're always talking at an officer level about opportunities for different ideas and improvements. What you say about rationalisation, yes, there's those things, and we have implemented some of that, e.g. for West Street. You know, there's a number of intersections where we actually say no right turn between 3 and 6 p.m, which is not dissimilar to many intersections in the southeast, in the busier. So that reduces the congestion element, okay, of what the right turner, reduces the safety risk as well, okay, because they're not allowed to do the right turn through a busy period of time. So by implementing that, people, obviously we get the other complaint, well, I can't do a right turn there anymore, or for that period of time, and that sort of thing. But that comes in and that allows that efficient traffic flow. So a lot of these things is you squeeze it one way, it comes out the other way. It's rare that you get something that holistically solves every issue at an intersection, but you can squeeze it in a few different directions at a time and just get an overall improvement. Yes, it's a little bit worse for some elements, but it might be better for the main. The work that we're bringing forward to you over coming weeks or in the next sessions are probably at a slightly higher level, but the outcomes out of that session may be council wants us to go away and look at a few other things in detail. So we'll probably wait for those discussions then. Thank you.
Sullivan. Councillor Shine. I think we've had enough questions. Do you want to have debate on this? Councillor Tim?
I want to have debate.
Yes, Councillor Harris-Sullivan, you want to speak to the motion? Thanks.
Oh, really, I think we've probably done it a fair bit to death, but I mean,
Yes.
I think primarily it's about safety, and I mean, statistics don't lie, and I don't know, I said before how much hurry we need to be in to wait 2 minutes maximum at a light for the sake of safety, and I think it's just, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Thank you. Councillor Tim?
Thanks, Chair. Look, happy to speak against this. The motion is that council support continuing to move to fully controlled right turn movements. I think that what we're trying to do is run around with the band-aids and the ambulance at the bottom of the end of the cliff and try and mitigate it on that end when we need to be looking at a better approach at driver education, training, responsibility, and when we move from trying to stop everyone to do things rather than taking personal responsibility for your actions, I think we have a much better outcome for all involved in society. The onus must be on the person taking the filtered turn rather than, and I feel as a society we do this a lot, we punish everyone for the actions of a few, and I don't see this as being best practice for society. So happy to speak against it. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Shine, did you want to speak for?
Look, I just repeat and rely on what I said before, but only comment that in relation to Councillor McMahon's comments, the logical conclusion to what he was suggesting is that we have no traffic lights at all.
Thank you. Anyone else against? Okay, I'll take the vote. Those in favour? Those against? It's committee, so it's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. That brings to close the Infrastructure Committee meeting for February, and thank you very much, councillors. It's been a very good debate. I just do point out that that our professional officers do have integrity and they are trained in this space, so thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Break? We have a 10-minute break? Oh, it's only a small one? Yeah, I think we'll go forward, Brian. I think, does that, what you councillors, right? Okay.
Do you reckon if we prosecute that we can get Paul Beck? If we prosecute that we can get Paul Beck?
I'll just resume the meeting. Can I have someone move that we close the session? Thanks, Councillor Carol Taylor and Councillor McDonald. All those in favour? Thank you. So can I have someone move that the confidential report of the Planning and Environment Court Appeals and compensation claims for January 2023 be noted by council, please? Councillor Carl and Councillor Melissa Taylor, all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. The meeting